Bonnie and Clyde, two names that became legendary. A couple on the run, bank robbers, outlaws, icons. But here's the thing. Their story isn't just some romantic crime movie. It's violent, chaotic, and way more real than people think. In just 2 years, they went from small-time criminals to one of the most wanted couples in America, leaving at least 13 people dead. So how did that happen, and why did so many people actually admire them? Let's break it down. This case is known as the Bonnie and Clyde crime spree. The real names were Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow, but together they became simply known as Bonnie and Clyde. They were also part of the Barrow Gang, a loose group of criminals who helped them carry out robberies and evade police. Their crimes took place between 1932 and 1934 during the Great Depression. Now, this is important because people were broke, banks were hated, and the trust in the system was low, so context actually plays a really big role in why Bonnie and Clyde were so famous. Now, let's get into what they actually did, because it wasn't just Hollywood shows. Yes, they robbed banks, but more often they robbed gas stations and small stores, and things got violent fast. They're responsible for at least 13 murders, including police officers, and a lot of these killings happened suddenly, usually when they felt cornered or threatened. From a psychological point of view, this shows impulsive behavior and constant fight-or-flight mindset. They were always on edge, always ready to react with violence. Here's the thing. This gets interesting though. Even though they were criminals, some people saw them as heroes. Why? Because during the Great Depression, banks were blamed for people losing their money and homes. So when Bonnie and Clyde robbed banks, it almost looked like they were fighting back against the system. But the biggest factor was the media. Newspapers followed their stories like crazy. Photos of Bonnie posing with guns made them look bold, fearless, and even glamorous. This is a great example of how media can shape public perception. People didn't always want to see the violence, they saw the image. Clyde Barrow had a history of crime even before meeting Bonnie. He had been to prison where he reportedly experienced abuse. That kind of trauma can increase aggression and hatred towards authority. Bonnie Parker, on the other hand, had a more normal upbringing. She was smart, creative, and even wrote poetry. So how did they end up here? The relationship shows signs of codependency. Clyde was the dominant personality, and Bonnie became deeply loyal to him. Together, they reinforced each other's behavior, which made things escalate. Here's something that a lot of people don't realize. Bonnie and Clyde were never caught and put on trial. Law enforcement tried for years, but the couple kept escaping, constantly moving across state lines. Eventually, authorities stopped trying to arrest them and started planning on how to stop them permanently. On May 23rd, 1934, everything came to an end. Police tracked them to a rural road in Louisiana and set up an ambush. When Bonnie and Clyde drove by, the officers didn't give them a chance. They opened fire immediately. Over 100 bullets were shot into the car. Both of them were killed instantly. From the law enforcement perspective, this was an example of using overwhelming force to eliminate a high-risk threat, something that was more common at the time. Because they died during the ambush, they were never arrested, never went to trial, and never received a formal sentence. Their deaths marked the end of the Barrow Gang and their crime spree. Here's something that makes this story even crazier. Bonnie wrote a poem called The Story of Bonnie and Clyde, where she basically predicted they would die violently, and even after anything, their story didn't fade. It turned into movies, songs, and pop culture legends, which raises a big question. Why do we sometimes romanticize people who are actually dangerous? At the end of the day, Bonnie and Clyde weren't just rebels or icons. They were responsible for real violence, real fear, and real loss. The story shows how powerful media can be, how psychology can shape behavior, and how history can sometimes turn criminals into legends.